Also, you should know that the Hebrew language has no future tense. In fact, there are no tenses in the Hebrew language as we understand tense. Rather, in the Hebrew language, action is either complete or incomplete. And it is out of this incompletion that Western translators betray things and make up a future tense. There's no future tense in Hebrew. Prophets, by definition, are experts for God's will for the here and now. The information is critical that I'm giving you here for interpreting Isaiah, particularly in light of Matthew's infancy narrative, because Matthew is writing his story 700 years after this situation in 733, 734. Could Isaiah have been talking about something 700 years in the future if there's no future tense in Hebrew? Folks, what do you think? So we have a bit of a problem here, Mel Gibson. Doesn't Mel Gibson open up the Passion of the Christ with Isaiah wrote this 700 years before it happened? Okay. This isn't Nostradamus, folks. In biblical Israel, all talk in the Bible, all talk of elective and predestination activity is always rooted in the present. It's a sort of after-the-fact predestination. Everything is forthcoming. She's pregnant, okay, she's going to have a child. We planted the field, we sowed the seed in the field, there's going to be a harvest. It's forthcoming, not future, forthcoming. That's how they view time. Once something happens, one may say that God chose it to happen and predestined it to happen. Why? How do you know? Because it happened. For instance, I could say if I was from this culture and I see all of you here, you were predestined from all eternity to be here today. How do I know that? Because you're here. That's called after-the-fact predestination. And that's how it is in the Bible. How does he know that Judas was predestined by God to betray Jesus? Because he did it. Exactly. And if you leave the Jesus group, then you were predestined to do that too. Because remember, there's no verb for it rained. It's always God sends the rain, right? But now we know, right, that God isn't really micromanaging the cosmos like that. Does he do that? Or does he work through secondary causality and instrumental causality? Sure he does. When you get a headache, do you go to Temple or do you go to Excedrin? So you do believe in secondary instrumental causality. Okay, very good. So do I. All Augustinian ideas of individuals being predestined into eternal bliss or damnation should not be anachronistically retrojected back into the Bible. Okay? Sorry, John Calvin. Moving right along. This information is critical in interpreting Isaiah, especially in light of Matthew's infancy narrative. Isaiah is going to give King Ahaz God's will for the here and now. A here and now that for him was 734, 733 BCE. The ambiguity of the prophet's son, Shear Yashab or Shear Yashub, is one thing that this idiot King Ahaz has to deal with. And Isaiah consoles the king. Don't worry about it. By the way, the prophets are very crude and they're funny. Don't worry. I'm going to bring my kid here. What's his name? You remember my kid's name?
Shear Yashab.
So, right. And depending on how you remember the name, you get a different message from God. But don't worry about that. But why should an idiot worry about anything? You didn't worry about anything when you burned your kid, right? See, the prophets are very crude. They slap people upside the head. That's what prophets do. And if you're a prophet, if you're baptized to be a Christian, guess what you're baptized to do? Slap people upside the head sometimes. And make a difference in the world. But we're not too into doing that. Because we're much more into sentimental and nice and make feeling good. And everything has to be warm and cuddly and Care Bear, which doesn't change anything and makes us look ridiculous and makes Jesus look ridiculous, if you really think about it.
Can I interpret something?
Sure.
I've always thought of a prophet as someone who estimated what would happen in the future, but what you're saying is that when the Matthean and the Lucans wrote the story,
they're dealing with their here and now.
They said
not the future.
It happened. It was prophesied.
What they're saying is that just like God was present in this mess in Isaiah,
yeah,
so he's also with us, Emmanuel, in this mess under Roman occupation now. Just like foolish leaders led Israel then, but God's plan was not hurt, God's plan right now is not being hurt. They're not saying anything like Nostradamus or Edgar Casey.
when we read the Bible, we dismiss that they were under Roman occupation a lot.
Exactly.
Really focus on that at all, and it's huge.
We've come to understand Jesus in a universalist sense, as applying, and I don't think that's wrong, to think of Christ as unique in all human history and bringing all human beings together. But we're so focused on that we tend to retroject this idea back into the New Testament authors as if they're interested in universalist claims. No, they're interested in what? The theocracy is for Israelites. The land of Israel. That's what they're interested in. And I'm not talking about 1948 Israel. I'm not talking, nothing against 19 in that sense, but they're not talking about that Israel. That's a different Israel. Okay? It's related to, just the way, in fact, it's the same organism, right? The tree is the same, but you don't say that the twig on the end of the tree is the same thing as the roots, do you? I hope you don't confuse different parts of the tree. So it's the same organism, but it's an evolved, grown out thing. And by the way, there's many branches on that tree. By the way, not just one branch. But anyway, I digress. So, right, the point is here, as we're going to see, my brother, that he's actually being very crude with this guy. He's an idiot, and he's treating him like one in many ways. Okay? And by the way, at great personal expense, the tradition says, small case T, that Isaiah got sawed in half because he did this one too many times. But that's what prophets do, and that's what happens to all the prophets, right? They get killed. Mm-hmm. That's what you do to prophets. Right? Go ask what happened to the Jesuits who went down to talk against power in Central America. Go ask what happened to Bishop Oscar Romero. Yeah. Right? He didn't get shot, by the way, because of his opinion on, ordination of males or his situation with, he didn't get shot because of what he thinks how the mass should go. He got shot because he stood up for the poor. When he started making waves there, then we start crucifying people. Oh, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Dangerous Christians, that's what we're called to be. Who's going to be that today? Anyway, moving right along.